She's our chairman of our Republican Party.
Good. Well, we had fun up there, didn't we?
And Mr. Long, he's our chairman of the election board.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Nancy Allen.
Doug Campbell, Eddie Hall.
Come right ahead.
Well, it's good to have everybody with us today, all our guests, and we welcome you to our town and to our Rotary Club. Today, Mr. Enos Hyman has volunteered to do our prayer, our pledge led by Mr. Eugene Ham, and our four-way test by Mr. Alex Boyce.
Recently, in the past years, and of course will be doing in the future. Thank you, Lord, for the senator, Mr. Corker, that can come, and friends, and the mayor, Mayor Battle, and others that can be with us today. Lord, we just ask you to be with our country. It's ours, and just pray, Lord, that we pull together, work together, rather than being critical. We can bless each other in the name of the Lord. Now, thank you for the food. Bless and nurse it in the name of our body, I pray. Those that are brought in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you please join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it
The truth. Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, I guess it's time for me to turn it over to our president, Mr. Frank Tuttle.
Thank you all for being here today. I have this long introduction that I had prepared, but as soon as Bill Newman gets through, I'm going to bring him up here and put him in charge, and we'll get moving if that's all right.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank everybody for being here today. Great crowd. Got some special out-of-town guests today and some in town too, but would like to recognize those. Now we know that we're not just a city, a county, we think regionally in our area and a lot of others too, and we appreciate the people that from our region that are here, and especially those that came across the line. So at this time I'd like, if you would, stand up and please hold your applause till the end though. The Mayor of Huntsville, Mayor Tommy Battle, Isaiah Robinson, where's Isaiah? Isaiah, he's our field rep for Congressman Desjardins. Thank you for being here today. The chairman of the Madison County Commission, Dale Strong, thanks for being here. John Law, Mayor of Fayetteville. Jerry Mansfield, the South Central Tennessee Development District Executive Director. We have our chairman with that, Joe Boyd Liggett, who is also the mayor of Marshall County. Joe Boyd, thanks for being here today. Paul Rawson, where's Paul? Paul Rawson, he's our executive director of the South Central Human Resource. Both his and Jerry's do a lot for Lincoln County and Fayetteville, and we appreciate it too. Joe Rich, he is the chairman of TVA. If y'all never met a chairman of the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, Joe, thanks for taking out of a busy schedule to be with us today. And with him we have Hobie Frady, John Nerger, and Jay Town. We also have with us today Rick Tillis. Rick, where are you? Rick he's the Republican nominee for the 92nd District State Rep. The general election will be in November, but he won that the Republican primary. Congratulations. Thanks for being here. Also, Lee Getz, that's the Senator's field rep. Where's Lee? Thank you. Caroline with the Senator. There may be others here from the Senator's office I hadn't met. Thank y'all for being here. And one that I don't want to forget, Diane Buchanan. You know, my wife's not here. A lot of times we forget those that we should recognize most. Diane Buchanan, she keeps my office going. Diane, thank you so much for getting me organized for the day, and I sure appreciate it. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. In 2012, Tennessee overwhelmingly elected Senator Corker for a second term. As most of you know, if you watch anything on Sunday morning on TV, he's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. My wife says he's the best dressed man in Washington because when he's on there, he does look pretty sharp. So she thinks you look good on TV. He's also an active member of the Banking and Budget Committee, and he also served Tennessee as our Finance Commissioner, and he was the mayor of Chattanooga. He spent most of his life, though, in business, and that business experience is what's allowed him to be so effective in the Senate. In fact, he's so effective that Time magazine selected Senator Bob Corker as one of 100 most influential people in the world. So please help me welcome our Senator, Bob Corker.
Mayor, thank you. I'm so honored to be here with so many people that I know make such a difference in this area, and I appreciate it. I was just telling him as I was leaving, thank you for that introduction, and you can tell your wife I don't look that good in person, so thank you so much. I'm glad to see surrounding elected officials here. I appreciate all of you taking the time, and those of you who serve on the TVA board and other places. I do believe that TVA, I've been in the Senate now 9.5 years, and I know there are always issues that come up, but I think TVA is better run today than it's ever been in my public life. And Joe, I thank you for your chairmanship and just the way you guys are conducting yourself on a business level. I was just in Bradley County yesterday where we had an announcement of 200 new jobs, and I know that having low-cost, reliable energy is a big part of what drives this area, drives Huntsville and other places, and so thank you for that. And as a note of personal privilege, I'm going to mention a couple of people, and that is Tillis. Rick Tillis has congratulations to you. Where is Rick? And winning your race, you told me how tough it was, and my hat's off to everyone who serves the public and runs. His brother serves in the United States Senate, is elected from North Carolina, and while I'm a person who spends more time, I'm chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and like to apply myself in that way. His brother's somebody that I think very soon is going to be in leadership in the Senate in a formal way, and I hope that he is. And I imagine that you guys both work in the same manner, so congratulations. I also want to say hello to Ed Sims. He and I went to college together and got to be great friends during that time, and he was a much more distinguished student in person than I was, and he's agreed not to share much about the way I was. So, but anyway, Ed, good to see you. And I noticed we got some constitutional officers back here. They're always the most popular people in the county. So I know y'all weren't mentioned, but thank you for being here. And just one last thing, I met a preacher coming through. He was retired, and I want to thank you for the prayer today. I've never heard of the Church of God from Indiana, only the Church of God from Cleveland, Tennessee, but they taught you well. That was a nice prayer. Thank you very much, and good to meet you. I'm going to just, what's that? Yeah. Good. So look, I would like to talk about, I want to talk about what y'all would like to talk about. So I'm going to make some opening comments. I know we have a good deal of time here. And so, again, I want to be able to talk about anything you wish. I do want to say to Rotarians that one of the things I do in my job is to travel around the world on behalf of not just Tennesseans, but people from Alabama and everywhere else as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I've been to 70 countries now. You know, just like many of you in business, I spend 80% of my time on the problems and 20% of my time on opportunity. So many of those countries I've been to over and over and over again. But the Rotarians, I know that there's more non-Rotarians here today, I think, than Rotarians, but I just happen to have my coin. A Rotarian gave me this, I don't know, last week in some place. I don't know which county I was in. But I just want to say to all of you, it's amazing the effect that the Rotary Club has had on people around the world. There are only 3 countries in the world today where polio is continuing to be an issue, and it's in large part due to the efforts of Rotarians around the world and their generosity. So I want to acknowledge that and tell you that I've seen the impact of that firsthand, so thank you. So the 3 things I want to mention, and they're all about the presidential race, since that's what everybody wants to talk about. I know that on both sides of the aisle, the primary this year ended up being something that was very different than what anybody in America, most people in America, thought was going to be the case. And again, it was on both sides of the aisle. And one of the big issues in our country today is the fact that people are concerned more so than in the past about their economic future. Am I doing okay with this? Yeah, thank you. People are concerned about whether their children are going to have the same opportunities that they have had, more so than we've had in the past. And it's especially prevalent among people who have high school degrees and maybe a couple of years of community college. People with advanced degrees seem to be doing a lot better. And so, you know, I think back, I think a large part of what's driving this are some of the technological changes that are just taking place, and people who've done all the right things in life, have worked hard, have been to their jobs on time, have been, had great work ethic like most Tennesseans have, are finding their futures to be more limited than they thought. When I was first in the construction business, in my own company at 25, I remember driving down the road to projects which were scattered all over the place and having to stop and make a call from a paved telephone. And I had to have the exact change and hope that the line wasn't busy, hope that my assistant had not stepped away from the phone, but it was really difficult to get a memo out or to move something along. And then I remember we had those big brick telephones that used to sit in the center of the car, and if you were in exactly the right location, then you could make a call. And my guess is you had some troubles with that here in this county and this city, and as I did traveling the state and other places. And then eventually, of course, we ended up with what we now use, where we can talk to anybody around the world. I remember when we used to do contracts, we'd send them out Federal Express and we'd mark them up, we'd redline them, and it'd take 2 days to get to the other person, and then they'd mark it up and they'd send it back, and by the time you got through with the process, it'd take 2 weeks sometimes to sign a contract. And now Today, literally, in a couple of hours, you can have the back and forth take place and even sign it on one of these. And of course, I think we make more mistakes now because we do it so rapidly, but we can. And so all of those things have just changed the world so dramatically. Three and a half months ago, Volkswagen, who's based in Chattanooga, came in they had a meeting to announce the fact that they were going to be building a driverless car. And while that's exciting for Chattanooga and the plant in Tennessee, you fast forward to what that means and you start looking at the trucking industry and you realize that in 10 years, all trucks they expect, these big 18-wheelers, they're going to be driverless. They're going to be done by computers. And even today, they have programs where they're much more accurate at backing up to a warehouse door than one that's driven by a person. Again, you think about how that changes and how that changes opportunity for people today who are working hard and doing that kind of thing. As a side note, Volkswagen came up to see me about 3 weeks ago and came to the Senate building. They wanted me to come see in person how this driverless technology worked, and they had flown a guy in from Europe and flown a guy in from California and had some of their executives out there waiting on me. They took me out on the interstate, and you know, it's one of those things you kind of have to do, and just for what it's worth, it didn't work. So I was so embarrassed for these two young guys who had come in, and you know, of course, I didn't say anything to their executives. I just got out. I understood what that meant and how it was going to work, but the point is the world is changing rapidly, and it's affecting people in big ways, and a lot of people feel like they're falling behind. And fortunately in our state, and I know Rick knows this and others here, certainly our great mayors who are here, who, by the way, it's such a privilege to do what I do. And I know I've told Joe and others this on multiple occasions, but the most rewarding thing I ever did was serve as mayor of a city where you touch people in such a real way. And I know Jerry and the mayor and others know this, but you know, the things that people care about most today are heads of households having good paying jobs, and that's playing out. That's playing out in this national race, and there's a lot of demagoguery. Hopefully, before we go to the ballot boxes in late October for early voting and the first Tuesday in November, all of us will have a much better idea as to what the two leading candidates propose, whether as it relates to the economy growth. One of the things that unfortunately will not be discussed, the second point I want to make, is the fiscal issue. For some reason, most people in our country just don't care that we have $19 trillion in debt. Don't care that we have $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities, meaning that we've made promises to people that will cost $100 trillion more than the income we generate to support those. And the fact that, you know, that, again, we're basically involving, I hate to use this word, but it's pretty tough, we're involved in generational theft, where basically we're putting these responsibilities off on future generations, but nobody seems to care. If you did a national poll today, 6% of Americans, as I understand it, care about the fiscal issue, and I don't think you're going to see either candidate focusing on that issue, because when you start talking about solutions, you start talking about some things that really are not that unpleasant, meaning that we can make tweaks and solve our nation's problems and save our country. We really can. But, you know, it's the kind of thing that does require changes, and it's changes to a voting population. I'm 63, and, you know, I'm going to be very soon in the category of people who benefit from the programs, the entitlement programs that are really hugely causing us fiscal issues. If I could just give you one stat, though, to you know, I talk to people all across our state, and you know, I bring up the word entitlements, and people get mad at me. They say, well, this is not welfare. I said, I'm not saying it's welfare, but I'm just saying when you get to a certain age, you're entitled to it. They're called entitlements. But Medicare, for instance, I hear people say, well, Bob, I paid for my Medicare. And all of us pay into Medicare, no question. But let me just give you a stat that I think shocks people. If you take the average two-wage earner family in America, where the two heads of household work their entire life, they would pay into our Medicare program $140,000. Now that is the part they would pay, plus the part their employer pays. I think all of you know in this audience that both pay into the program. That same family would take out of the Medicare program $422,000. Now that money's adjusted, meaning the old money's inflated to today's dollars, where you're talking apples to apples. So 140 goes in and 422 comes out. I don't think most of your businesses could do very well on that formula, and you certainly can't make it up with volume, which, by the way, we have plenty coming with my baby boomer generation coming along. So we've got to make some changes. We don't have to do things that alter people's lives. We don't. But we do have to begin turning the ship around, and unfortunately, in this presidential race, I'm afraid it's not going to be a topic of discussion. I don't think there's going to be any way to force the candidates to discuss this in a real way. The third issue that will come up, and I'll stop, and hopefully we'll all have a much better understanding, is the whole issue of America's role in the world. You know, we're going through a period of time right now where many people in our country want to see a retrenchment taking place. No doubt there's been some mistakes made in foreign policy, and for the last 15 or 16 years, we've had a pretty tough time as it relates to some of the decisions that have been made. I do want to say, though, that humbly, and I know many of you, some of you have served in the military, and my hat is off to anyone who has done so. Far greater public service than I'll ever offer. But a world without American leadership truly is a world that I don't think people here in Fayetteville want to live in. It makes a lot of difference for the United States to be playing a leadership role. That does not mean we've got to have boots on the ground and police every issue that happens around the world, but it does mean that America is engaged, that our moral leadership, our free enterprise leadership, and every type of leadership that we have has to be exercised, or the world itself is not a good place. I tell people all the time I don't watch a lot of television. I really don't. I get up in the mornings and I have 4 major publications and 3 minor publications that I read every morning just to understand what's happening around the world. And I kind of have to do that to serve in the capacity that you've allowed me to serve in. I will say that because this presidential race has been the way that it has and provided the entertainment in some cases that it has, I've been watching this program called Morning Joe sometimes in the morning just to see what happened the night before. Just for what it's worth, as much as the American people have been tuning in, and American people are tuned into this race in many ways more than those in the past, people around the world know just about as much about what's happening in this presidential race here in America as we do at home. And that's because we affect them so much. And so they too are hoping to understand during this presidential race where America is going. And what I hope for them, but most importantly for our own citizens, is that by the time we go into the voting booth in late October, early November, we'll have a good sense of what the 2 candidates have in store for American leadership around the world, which I would just say again, very, very important. So with that, let me just stop, and I'd be glad to take any questions, comments, however controversial or non-controversial they might be. And again, thank you for letting me speak to such a great group of leaders from this region in this way. So I'll stop and take questions, comments.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About the presidential race. The GOP as a whole doesn't seem to be supporting Donald Trump, which is very disappointing. You know, he is the nominee, and he's our guy. And if they don't get behind him and support him, we're going to wind up with Hillary Clinton again. So, I mean, how do you corral these guys and get them behind them?
Yeah, you know, Rick, it's there is no corralling. I mean, you know, I had I've had people on both sides of that issue saying, I cannot believe you guys let happen in the primary what happened. That's been one side. And then you hear the other side where people are saying, X could be, we should corral people together and pull people together. It's just not the way our country is today. I mean, it used to be there was kind of a hierarchy on both sides of the aisle that, made decisions, think about 40 or 50 years ago at conventions or other places. And, with people have access to information, gosh, I look at the hundreds of thousands of emails that we get in our office each year, which, by the way, are helpful to us because they're emailing us about things that are concerned. When we send responses, I sign off on every single response. So it educates me, but back to the point you're making. Look, we live in a world where now people are much more mobile, and I just don't see either. I memean, it's going to happen the way it's happened. By the way, there's been dissension on both sides of the aisle, just for what it's worth. I know that, it seems that there's been a little bit more consolidation recently on the Democratic side than the Republican side. But again, there's just, the Republican nominee has kind of made his way, if you think about it, running against the very folks that you might think would consolidate. And yet, even those folks that you think can, they really cannot. I mean, it's just not the way our society is today. So your point is well taken. I don't know who in the world it is that could possibly make that kind of thing happen. And I'm not sure the candidate even necessarily wants the kind of person that might be able to make that happen to be speaking on his behalf, right? Yes, sir.
What occurred when you met with Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, it's a tremendous honor to be thought of in the capacity I was thought of. It's a tremendous honor. And I went there, obviously very respectfully. I caught a train up early from Washington and began my meetings at 10:30 in the morning there. I met with Eric Trump first for about 30 minutes, and I met with Ivanka Trump for about 30 minutes. I met with Jared, the son-in-law, who's married to Ivanka, for about 30 minutes. I met with Paul Manafort. I met with, the media person for a little while. I had lunch with our chief of staff who accompanied me just to talk about what had occurred, and then from 3 o'clock on, I was with Donald Trump. I met with him first in the office. We rode out to the airport and flew down to Raleigh. And got back home about 11 o'clock that night. So I spent close to 8 hours, 7 hours and 45 minutes or so with the nominee himself, and very, very insightful. I quickly shared with them, as I know has been publicly noted, that I'm gonna say by 4:30-ish or so, shared with him that I just didn't feel like in this campaign at this time over the next 120 days that I was the right person to be vice presidential nominee. I did so very respectfully, and we talked about that for a while, and then I shared it again, and then so what it really did was create a situation where instead of, if you will, auditioning for a job or being interviewed for the next 6 hours and 15 minutes or so, it was more of a commiserating. I mean, it wasn't like, I was trying to achieve a position and he knew that I wasn't, and so we spent the rest of the time commiserating about the other people who might be and just issues around the world and that kind of thing. So it was very informative and gave me tremendous insight into their family, the relationship he had with his employees at Trump Tower, which, by the way, is very good, and just sort of into how the campaign itself is going. So it was a great day. I spent the night in New York, got up early the next morning, and got back by work time in the Senate, and the rest is history. Yes, sir.
Shannon,
Yes, sir.
Brown recently on Fox News said that there are 31 different gender listings in the workforce.
Jeez.
And if you do not identify the person properly of their gender that they want to be identified as, and they have let you know either 2 or 3 times maybe their preference of gender. If you do not, then you can be fined or sued for up to $250,000. She gave that on Fox News. Now, as a minister, I, of course, by the way, my tips was they say preachers don't tip good. That's the reason I said preachers. So getting back to my
Well, do preachers tip good or not? Let's get that straight.
my wife sees to it, how about that? But as a minister and doing weddings
Yeah.
and what have you, and joining the church, I get great in trouble.
Yeah.
I hope you see where I'm coming from.
I-
Do it well.
Yeah, I do. Just for what it's worth, I've never heard of someone being sued for not naming the gender.
28 cases. They've
Yeah.
got 28 pending right now. She's
Yeah.
in New York City.
Yeah, huh. Well, yeah,
I know that's a long way off.
it is. And I don't know, and not everything that's on Fox News is necessarily the way things are, but yes.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But it does trouble me.
Yeah, no, I understand the general direction troubles you, and I'd have difficulty coming up with 31 different ones personally, and yeah, I don't know. Thank you for sharing that. I will, Lee's back here taking notes, and just for what it's worth, if you'll give us an email address, we can, through our legal counsel, find out what is and isn't relative to that issue, and we'd love to be able to do so if you'll let us. Okay? Yes, sir.
In your role on the Foreign Relations Committee, can you speak a little bit about the stability and instability in the world at the moment? And if America doesn't stay where it is, of course, the role Russia has with Putin and what he will
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, so, you know, if you think back, great question, if you think back to the year 2013, when Assad, the leader of Syria, crossed the red line and used chemical weaponry on his citizens, he crossed President Obama's red line. That was a defining moment for the United States, and it was a defining moment for our allies, and certainly a defining moment for the Middle East. We didn't take the actions that we began taking. It actually occurred about this time, meaning it was in August. I was actually out of the country, and I caught a flight back and wrote, as the ranking member, at the time we were not in the majority, wrote the authorization for the use of military force against Assad. We had a contentious debate, as you might imagine, a lot of classified briefings. We wrote it, we passed it out on a bipartisan basis out of our committee. And then, and most everybody else was gone, when we came back, the president did not take action. I don't know if you remember, John Kerry was giving a speech and all of a sudden decided to utilize Russia in helping us get the chemical weapons out. That sent, I just can't describe in its fullness the shock waves that us not taking action had in the Middle East, had on our allies, and I'm convinced that it had a huge impact on Putin, where he saw that, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, I mean I think people on both sides of the aisle, if being fully honest, would say this. I think Putin was able to see that we were not going to take actions, and we were going to do everything we could to keep from taking action. So all of a sudden, this guy, if you remember back in those, I mean, in 2013, Russia was nothing. I mean, nothing. I mean, you know, oil prices had begun to go down. They had budgetary issues. They haven't transformed their economy from being one based on minerals to, where most of the world is today that's advanced. And all of a sudden, he steps on the scene, and he's a big part, all of a sudden, of what's happening in Syria. Very soon thereafter, the issue happens in Ukraine. He takes Crimea, by the way, just takes it. He now has about 40,000 troops in eastern Ukraine, and so when I hear some of our candidates talk about Ukraine and act as if Russia's not there, there are 40,000 troops there. There's a Ukrainian, I'll assure you, that was killed today by Russian troops. And so he's basically reshaped Europe in so many ways, because now, as you know, about 2.5 months ago, he stepped into a vacuum in Syria that we left. We not only didn't take the operation, which, by the way, was a 10-hour operation planned off the Mediterranean. There was going to be no boots on the ground. It was going to be all done by our Navy on our side. We had other allies that were going to use their aircraft. We not only didn't do that, we never supported the moderate opposition that we said we would support there. There was a group of people there that were like folks in this room that just wanted their country to be free and democratic. We never supported them. That went on for years. We left them hanging. I've visited with them. I've been in refugee camps, and I'm embarrassed when I go there. I can't even go back to the refugee camps on the border of Syria anymore, because I've told them, look, help's on the way. This is what we're going to do. We never did it. So what's happened now, as you know, Russia stepped in 2.5 months ago, and now whatever happens in Syria is not going to be determined by the United States. I hate to say it, it's going to be determined by Russia and Iran. And now, because the bombing has continued of innocent civilians, as you know, and it's been going on for so long, we've had this refugee crisis, which has changed the context of Europe. And so what he's been able to do is basically now become a player on the world stage, no question. Who is it that we are most focused on today? He's a player on the world stage. He's developed the status that he wishes. There are people in the region that will tell you, as much as they don't like him, they'll say, Corker, he does what he says. That's tough to hear. So he's taken a country that, really was a regional player. You've heard our president say that. You've heard of it, nothing but a regional player. And he's turned himself now into someone who's playing on the world stage, and has done more to upend our policy towards Europe. Our policy towards Europe for 70 years has been that it's whole, democratic, and free. And now, with the refugee crisis, the problems that he's creating for our allies there, it's really what led to Brexit, right? What you're seeing is much of that crumble apart. So it's sad for me to see what we've allowed to happen, and it's sad for me to see the alliances that have been broken. It's definitely sad to see what's happening in Europe right now with the tremendous concerns that they have relative to security, and just the way, with all the refugees coming in, the way their communities are changing. Yes, sir.
On Brexit, do you think that the vote in the United Kingdom was influenced as much by the immigration changes that came with that as it was the economic impact of the leaving Europe?
I think it was both. I think that that fourth clause in the European Union, there's 4 things that they agree to, but that fourth clause of open borders, really, even though, as you know, they're separated by ocean and they don't have the same problems that the rest of Europe has, I think that was a big part. And as you know, as a member of the European Union, there's also a package of benefits that the government has to pay to people who come there in that manner, so that was an issue. But I think in many ways, I think it's a great question, the same things that we've seen sort of roil our primary processes on both the Republican and Democratic side, those forces are at work in the UK too, where again, especially technological advances that are occurring. I mean, again, people who've been hardworking and done all the right things in life are seeing not the opportunity that they've seen in the past. So I think it was a combination of the two. And I think that, like I had in Cleveland, I had breakfast, or I had coffee early one morning with Nigel Farage, the guy that, you know, kind of led the Brexit effort there. And my sense in talking to him that, again, it was both of those. So. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned earlier that you read 4 publications every day and 3 more minor ones. Just as a newspaper person, I'm curious to know what those are.
Oh gosh, I don't know if I should share. But I will. Look, every morning I read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, and the Financial Times of London. I don't read the whole. Each one of them has areas that I like the most. The one that I read the most thoroughly is the Wall Street Journal. But I read all of those, and then I scan more quickly, but I think I get a good sense of what's happening. The Tennessean, the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and Politico. Politico. You know, Rick's brother is much better than I am at sort of the political side of things, and I'm sort of been a policy guy and speak very directly and frankly, as he does too, don't get me wrong. But, you know, several years ago my staff said, hey, you know, you ought to read Politico too and kind of get an understanding of who shot John, you know, what's going on in the Senate. So I read it, I scan it too. So those 7.
Any other questions?
Well, listen, we're getting you out of here early. I know Rotary clubs leave in 14 minutes, but and you don't want to be standing in front of the door. But Mayor, I thank you for the introduction and your friendship, and I want to thank everybody here in the room for the privilege of being able to weigh in on the types of issues that you raised today. Our country's got a lot of challenges, and you know, it's the greatest country on earth, and in some ways we're feeling defeated right now, and it's not a pleasant thing to watch. When I come to Rotary clubs in places like this, I don't feel any of that. I feel people really striving ahead, building communities, solving problems, but somehow or another, you know, as a nation, we've developed a little bit of a pale, and I hope that very soon, actually, I hope after November, the first Tuesday in November, that's going to change. But I just want to say in closing, this still is the greatest country on earth, and it only takes going to any other country to know that that's the case, and it's because of people like you. So thank you very much.
I would like to thank everybody for being here today, and stay the course. We're here for you. We got your back. And in this part of the world, it doesn't get any better. And I won't swap jobs with you, but I agree with you. Mayor is a great job. And if there's any photos we need to take afterwards, I know there were a couple of people. Let's get that done real quickly, and we will be dismissed. Do have a package if Lee or someone will pick up, and then a wish list too. You don't think you're going to get out of here with us asking for something. It doesn't cost anything. I promise, are the people, but we are looking at wanting to start a naval ROTC program at our county high school. As I know you know, Admiral Frank B. Kelsa, and we just want some influence. So no money. Thank you. Thank everybody. You're dismissed.